Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Pearl, starring Mia Goth and directed by Ty West. Now, I'm kind of a newbie to this movie, so let's just get straight into this. The year is 1918, and we're at a house that was shown in the last movie, and Pearl, returned by Mia Goth, lives in that house with an abusive mother, Ruth, who tells her not move out of the house and to not wear her old clothes and focus on her working at the barn. And she feeds the cows hay, and by hay I mean the horses' food. And Pearl believes she's special, and everybody is going to know her name, and picks her up a pitchfork and kills a goose and feeds it to the fucking alligator that was introduced in the last film. And what a weird way to open a film about a young woman becoming a killer. But hell, they gotta start younger. By the end of the movie, and Pearl reads a newspaper about how World War I is almost over, and Ruth tells Pearl she can read it after dinner, as the end of the war is more important than dinner time with your family, and if you want your husband to coming home, as Pearl's husband Howard, who was introduced in the last movie, and they have dinner, and Pearl helps her crippled father eat dinner, reading a letter from Howard, and takes a bath while her father is there, and Ruth tells Pearl to cover her face like she's a monster of some kind. And this movie is weird in so many levels. And I just got through reviewing Kinds of Kindness, but don't get me wrong, Mia Goth delivers a good performance in this movie, in one of the weirdest movies I've seen thus far in this series. Now, to be fair, this is better than Kinds of Kindness. Pearl goes to town and grabs a drink and to the cinema and watches a picture, and she sees a projectionist on the side of the building, and he offers, if she wants to see another picture, to come by the cinema and knock on the door on the side of the building, as well as give her a piece of film from the picture she just saw. And I like the chemistry between Pearl and the projectionist. As she rides her bicycle home, she misses a piece of her bicycle and finds a scarecrow. And the way the scarecrow looks made me think of the Wizard of Oz as far as how its dress goes. And Pearl asks to dance with it, and she does kiss the scarecrow, imagining it's the projectionist, and she yells, "I'm married," and all of a sudden pretends to have sex with the scarecrow. And that was uncomfortable while I was thinking, what the fuck is going on here? Pearl gets home, and Ruth acts so abusive to her, as she tells her to wash her hair and change her father's diapers, as it's a mess, and that made me sick, like I was gonna vomit, because that's fucking disgusting. And Ruth tells Pearl she can't eat too much while she's starving, as she says they have to watch their money, which I understand, but while someone is starving, and Ruth tells Pearl she has a sign of weakness, and I hate the character of Ruth, as she comes off nasty and mean to the movie's main character. And other than Pearl, do I like any of the characters so far? I haven't found one character but yet. But we move on to Pearl having a friend like Miss Mitzi and her mother, who comes by the house to give her and Ruth some food, and Ruth leaves it on the porch, which happens to be a pig. And Mitzi invites Pearl to an upcoming dance audition, and she'll go around 7 cities. And there's a character I can get behind other than Pearl. And who am I talking about? Mitzi. And she's a character I like, but the rest of the characters are terrible, and they can go fuck themselves. With those two are absolutely relatable, those two characters are. Pearl hides from Ruth while trying on one of Ruth's clothes, like a red dress and the hat she found on the scarecrow at one point, and she goes to the cinema at the door where she was introduced to the projectionist earlier in the film, and he shows her a porn film as they're in the future, which is what the characters in X filmed last time. As she says she doesn't like reality, and it's nice to talk to someone other than all animals at the barn. And the projectionist believes Pearl should be on screen and in the movies. And she comes back home in the middle of the night and hears Ruth crying because Pearl went missing. As she goes to bed for the night, and the chemistry between Pearl and the projectionist was not good, as Pearl and Howard and any other of the other characters last time. Next day comes, and Pearl puts her father in the lake, or almost does, with the alligator, until Ruth comes by and brings the father back in the house. And Pearl wants to know why Ruth hates her, but she says she needs to learn reality, which is a subject I don't really like talking about too much, as Pearl gets an egg and takes them back in the barn and smashes it like it had no life, which is painful, as the acting in this movie can be painful sometimes, like the next scene at the dinner table where Ruth tells Pearl to not go to the dance audition after Pearl telling her about it, as she finds a flyer and have an argument about it, as Ruth thinks she knows what's best. Bullshit, which I'm calling bullshit at this point, because not everybody knows what's best for themselves or their kids and others. At one point, she knows Pearl almost kills her father and slaps Pearl, and Pearl slaps Ruth back, and Ruth goes on fire, and it kills her, and it took her 50 fucking minutes of the movie to show she's a murderer, and that took a little bit too long for me. Pearl goes to the projectionist and kisses him, and imagines herself on stage, and Ruth was in the dream, and she wakes up and she practices her dance routine, and the projectionist drives Pearl home, and she shows the projectionist around the house as she left her father somewhere around the house, and the projectionist sees a bunch of maggots on the pig, and they kiss some more. And here's the problem: isn't she married? As that was kind of bothering me, and the projectionist smooches Pearl, and he hears something while she ignores it, and the projectionist looks for the noise, and she says it's the dog, and who made a mess in the kitchen, and shows him around the barn and all the different animals, and the projectionist asks what's the dog's name, and she says they don't have a dog, and he's weirded out by Pearl as she's scaring him, and she kills him with a pitchfork twice, and he drives away, and he dies while driving, and Pearl continuing to kill him with the fucking pitchfork, which was a preposterous scene to begin with. Like, how the fuck do you make a lie and not stick with it? That's what was bothering me about this scene. Pearl gets her father cleaned up as he's afraid of Pearl, and she puts on the red dress and goes to the dance audition, while her father sees her leaving the house by suffocating her father and throwing the projectionist and his car in the lake with the alligator. When she gets to the dance audition, Mitzi is afraid of audition first, as she lets Pearl go first while some other girls are crying. Pearl is confident she can get the part, and she auditions her dancing moves, and she doesn't get the part because she's not a blonde. And this is the second scene that was painfully acted, as she humiliated herself by begging them to please take her because she's a star, but they still say no. And the father's death was off screen, but at the same time you can hear it, which is one of the only things smart about this movie as far as using your imagination goes. Pearl cries out loud outside the building, and Mitzi cheers her up, and they go back to the house, and we see the maggots continue to grow on the pig, and they gave them earlier in the film. And she sits, and Pearl has a monologue about how she will never get out of the farm, and she knows Mitzi got the part as she doesn't feel well, as she pretends Mitzi acts like Howard. And the monologue is well acted by Mia Goth, as she's good in this movie. As so far, I would prefer to go back to Maxine, the other character she played in X, which is what we're going to get next time. Mitzi leaves behind, she's uncomfortable and runs for her life, while Pearl comes walking quickly towards Mitzi with an axe, as Mitzi does fall and eventually gets caught by Pearl, and Pearl cuts her to pieces and gives the pieces to the alligator, which tells me she hates blondes, as she said it in X. As Pearl has dinner with the family while burned up and dead, and they have some of the pig that was crawling with maggots, ew. And Howard gets home from the war, and Pearl sets up dinner for when Howard gets in the house, and Pearl smiles and credits roll while she smiles like she's evil for 5 minutes of the credits. And the climax was weird, but it's better weird than Kinds of Kindness, as was this whole fucking movie. I can't believe, after liking X quite a bit, this felt like a rush job, as it came out the same year as X, and this is one fucked up story I didn't care for reasons I'll explain in the rating. I'll give this movie a 4.5 out of 10. This movie is fucking weird, but don't get me wrong, two things. It's better than Kinds of Kindness, and Mia Goth delivers a good performance, but there were times it made me uncomfortable to the point what the fuck is going on here? And sometimes it went to the disgusting route, like I was going to vomit, and that's not a good thing. And there's two characters I do like, I can get behind, and they're Pearl and Mitzi because they're relatable, but the rest are terrible characters. There are vibes I got from X and The Wizard of Oz, as this is a prequel to X and the barn scenes, and the Scarecrow, as well as Ruth as the mean old lady, and Pearl is playing Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, while some of the acting was painful in a few scenes, like at the dinner table, for example, when Pearl and Ruth have the argument in the dinner table. And after Pearl gets rejected from the audition, and I couldn't stand watching those scenes, it took too long for the movie to tell the people Pearl is a murderer. And the fact that this is an extraordinary true story, and by X I mean the letter X, origin story, like the fact this series is called X, and unfortunately this is a mild non-recommendation for the reasons I explained by the end of the day. I didn't really care for this movie, while X was the much better movie of the two movies coming out in the same year of 2022, but this one felt not too surprisingly disappointing. And Maxine has to work very hard for me to like this series again, like how I liked X, for example, to the point I want to go back to the character Mia Goth played in that movie. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time I will be back with Maxine. And until then, I ain't no fucking movie star, that's for damn sure.